I used to think betrayal had a face. A certain look in the eyes, a trembling in the voice, maybe a lipstick stain or a late-night text you weren't meant to see. But it turns out, sometimes betrayal wears your husband's cologne. Sometimes it greets you at the door with 3 familiar smiles. And sometimes it waits inside your own home. That day, I remember I wasn't even supposed to be home early. He had texted me earlier, said he left something for me. "Go check the living room," he said. "You'll see what I mean." And so I did. I parked outside, walked up the steps I'd climbed 1,000 times. The air felt heavier than usual, like the house was holding its breath. It was quiet, but not empty. You know that feeling? That eerie sense that someone's already watching you before you even knock? I stood there for a moment. Something in me hesitated. Not fear, not exactly. More like my body knew something my heart wasn't ready to understand. Still, I knocked. Even though it was my house, I knocked. And when the door opened, it wasn't him. It was them. 3 of his closest friends, Toby, Lonra, and Cunnel, standing in the hallway. Not surprised. Not confused. Just waiting, like they'd rehearsed it. I remember how Toby smiled first. The kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. And how Lonra leaned against the wall like it was all a joke. Cunnel, he just looked at me. Like I was late to something I didn't agree to. No one said it. But the room told me everything. Something had been planned. And I was the only one who hadn't read the script. You think you know your husband. Until you open the door and realize you don't even know yourself anymore. What you'll do. What you'll allow. What you'll excuse, just to feel wanted. That day wasn't about love. It wasn't even about desire. It was about power. They called it a game. But I left with scars no one could see. So, if you've ever had a moment that shook the ground beneath your life, if you've ever questioned whether you were safe in the arms of the one you trusted most, then you'll understand why I'm telling this story. Because what happened next changed everything. Subscribe to Heartfelt Tales Unfold. These stories aren't just entertainment. They're warnings and confessions. And the next one might sound a little too familiar. I was 32, married for 6 years. And for most of those years, I was the only one doing the loving. You know, the kind of love that packs lunch in silence. That washes clothes no one thanks you for. That waits up late just to say, "I'm glad you're home," even when you know he's not really coming home to you. That was me. On paper, we looked good. He was charming. Successful. The kind of man that people leaned in to listen to. The kind of man that smiled wide in public, but barely looked me in the eye at dinner. They all admired him. Called him a provider. A leader. But behind closed doors, he led with absence. Late nights at the office. Business trips with no return calls. Loud laughs with friends I barely knew, friends who always seemed to know more about him than I did. Toby was the smooth one. Always talking. Always joking. The kind of man who could compliment you without blinking and still make you feel like it was harmless. Lonra, he barely spoke. But when he looked at you, you felt stripped down. Like he saw things you hadn't said out loud. And Cunnel, he was married. But you'd never know it from the way he watched women walk by. Even me. Especially me. They came around often. Too often, really. They'd sit in the living room like it was theirs. Drinks in hand. Shoes off. Calling out for him when he wasn't even home. Sometimes I'd wonder if he liked the idea of me more than the person I actually was. Like I was just a frame he hung on the wall to complete the picture. The house always looked perfect. Clean floors. Fluffed pillows. But it felt cold. Like a museum. A place where things were displayed, but never touched. I used to wait for him at the window. Watching headlights, guessing which one might be his. But after a while, I stopped hoping. Now, I just wait not to feel forgotten. Because being invisible in your own marriage, it doesn't feel like loneliness. It feels like drowning quietly in a room full of air. It was a Thursday. He called me around noon, voice casual, like it always was when he didn't want me to read into anything. "The guys might stop by the house later," he said. Then he added, "I left something for you there. You'll see." No explanation. No hint of surprise or celebration in his tone. Just, "You'll see." I don't know why that line stayed in my head. Maybe because surprises weren't his thing anymore. Maybe because I had stopped expecting kindness from him, so when it came, it didn't feel comforting. It felt confusing. I left work early that day. Didn't tell him. Didn't ask for permission. I just wanted to breathe in my own space for a minute alone, without the weight of pretending. But the moment I turned onto our street, something felt wrong. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was just still. Too still. The curtains were drawn. We never kept them closed in the afternoon. I loved the way the light fell into the hallway around 3 p.m., but that day it was shut out. There was music playing. Soft. Low. His favorite playlist. Not mine. The kind of songs he played when he was hosting people or hiding something. I walked up to the door. The mat still crooked, the flower pot still tilted just like I left it. But the handle, it was unlocked. I froze for a second. Checked my phone. No new texts. No missed calls. He hadn't said they were already there. Still, I didn't open the door. I knocked. I stood outside my own house and knocked. There was movement on the other side. Not footsteps exactly. Just shifting. Then came the laugh. It was low, familiar. And it wasn't his. It was Toby's. The door creaked open. And there they were. Toby, Lonra, Cunnel, all standing inside the hallway like they were waiting on me. No one looked surprised. No one moved quickly to explain. They just stood there. Toby leaned against the doorframe like he owned it. Lonra had his hands in his pockets, that same unreadable look in his eyes. Cunnel. He smiled first. That half-smile he always wore, the one that made you wonder what he wasn't saying. I looked past them. No sign of my husband. I said his name. No one answered. Just that song, still playing in the background. I stepped inside. Because what else could I do? And the door closed behind me. Softly, like they'd done this before. I smiled. Or at least, I tried to. You know the kind of smile you give when you walk into a room and you're not sure if you're welcome. Or walking into a setup. That was me. They greeted me like everything was normal. Toby even said, "We've been waiting for you," like it was some kind of inside joke. Cunnel laughed as he handed me a glass of wine I didn't ask for. Lonra just watched. Always watching. I told myself to relax. To stop overthinking. Maybe he did plan something. Maybe it was a gift, a surprise, something different to break the dull rhythm of our life. Maybe, for once, he remembered I existed. But something was off. The energy in the room wasn't warm. It was staged. Like they had rehearsed this. The living room was spotless, too spotless. The pillows perfectly arranged. A candle lit on the side table. The kind of setup I usually did before guests arrived. But I hadn't done this. I looked around. No sign of him. His jacket wasn't on the hook. His keys weren't on the tray. But his scent was everywhere. I sat on the edge of the couch. Tense. Still holding the wine. I didn't sip. Toby sat across from me. His eyes didn't leave mine. Not even when Cunnel cracked a joke about how I was finally joining the boys. I forced a laugh. But I didn't understand the joke. I wasn't supposed to. Lonra leaned against the wall. Arms folded. Silent. Like he was waiting for something to start. I asked where my husband was. Toby shrugged. He said we should wait for you. Wait for me? For what? My chest felt tight, but I kept smiling. I kept pretending I wasn't uncomfortable. That my hands weren't shaking around the glass. That the silence between their sentences didn't sound like anticipation. Why didn't they seem surprised to see me? Why didn't anyone text him when I arrived? Why did I stay? When everything in me whispered run. I looked at the clock. The minutes dragged. No one made a move to leave. No one looked at their phone. It was like they had all the time in the world. Toby leaned in slightly and said, "You always look better in soft light." "He never told you that." I blinked, tried to smile, but something inside me nodded. Cunnel laughed again, this time slower, and said, "She doesn't need to be nervous. We're all family here." Lonra didn't laugh. He just stared. And I couldn't tell anymore if I was imagining it, if I was being paranoid, or if something was about to happen that would change me. I thought maybe I was overthinking, that my loneliness had turned into suspicion, that maybe I'd forgotten how to feel safe, even around people I'd known for years. But that's the thing about instincts. They don't scream, they whisper. And that whisper was growing louder every second I stayed in that room. Toby refilled my glass without asking, held it out to me like it was an invitation, not a drink. I hesitated. I stared at it long enough for the silence to stretch. Then I took it. Not because I wanted it, but because refusing felt like breaking some unspoken script I didn't understand yet. I didn't sip. Cunnel reached into his back pocket, pulled out a small, folded note, handed it to me with a grin. "From him," he said. "He said to give you this. Said it's your reward." My fingers trembled a little as I opened it. The paper smelled like his cologne. Familiar. Sharp. Too familiar. In his handwriting, there it was. Just one line. "Enjoy yourself, babe. You've earned it." That was it. No explanation. No occasion. No signature. Just those words. I read it twice, then looked up at them. They weren't confused. They weren't surprised. They were watching me. And then I heard the sound, the soft click of the door locking. I turned. Lonra was standing by the knob, hand still resting on it. Expression blank. Calm. Too calm. My voice caught in my throat. I should have asked what this was. I should have told them I was leaving. But I didn't. Toby leaned forward, voice lower now. He said you might be shy, but he also said you've always wanted this. My heart stuttered. A flush of heat crept up my neck. Not desire, something uglier. Shame, panic, confusion, and curiosity. Because deep down, some small part of me wondered, did he know how lonely I was? Did he know how invisible I'd been feeling? And was this his solution? I froze. I didn't say no, but I didn't say yes. I just sat there, paralyzed. Not by threat, not by danger, but by the sick cocktail of everything I hadn't said out loud. The things I buried every time he didn't touch me. Every time he looked at me like I was wallpaper. Every time I cried in the shower and wiped my face before stepping out. The room felt smaller, like the walls were inching closer with every breath. I could smell them, their colognes, mixing in the air. Toby's spice. Cunnel's sweetness. Lonra's something darker, almost like smoke. It wrapped around me like a net. No one moved. No one raised their voice. It wasn't loud, but it was heavy. The tension sat in the room like thick fog. And all I could hear was my own breath, shallow, uneven. And under it all, that song still played in the background. His song. Still soft. Still steady. Like he was in the room, even though he wasn't. Like this was his plan, not theirs. And I was just another thing he'd handed over. Just another silence he expected me to keep. I stood up. Too fast. The wine sloshed in the glass, but I didn't care. I placed it on the table without looking, not even sure if it landed right. My legs felt numb. But I walked toward the door. Lonra was still standing there. He didn't move. Didn't say anything. He didn't block me, not with his body, but with his presence. You know when someone's in your way without touching you? When they just wait, like the choice is yours, but not really. It was like that. He tilted his head slightly, watching me, waiting for me to do something. Say something. I looked at the lock, then at him. I didn't scream, didn't cry, didn't shove past him like the version of myself I used to believe I was. I just stood there, frozen, still, And in that stillness, something inside me cracked. Not like glass. More like bone. Quiet, but permanent. I looked each of them in the eyes. Toby, still seated. Cunnel, halfway to standing. Lonra, unmoved. And I said one thing. Tell him I knocked. And you answered. That was it. I opened the door myself. Stepped out without slamming it. No dramatic exit. No broken glass. No accusations. Just the sound of my footsteps on the tile. The late afternoon sun spilling across the pavement. And the blood in my ears, loud as a siren. That was the last time I saw them all in the same room again. Not because they disappeared, but because I did. I left a version of myself behind that day, one that still believed silence was safer than truth. You think you'd react differently? Maybe you would. Maybe you'd scream. Maybe you'd fight. Maybe you wouldn't walk out with your heart clenched like a fist and your dignity trailing behind you. Or maybe you'd do exactly what I did. And never admit it out loud. Subscribe to Heartfelt Tales Unfold and walk through the doors you never dared open. That night, he came home like nothing happened. He kissed my forehead, asked how my day was, took off his shoes at the door like he always did. Then he asked what I wanted for dinner. As if there hadn't been 3 of his friends in our house. As if I hadn't walked into something I still didn't have words for. I kept waiting for the question. For the look of guilt. For a flicker of recognition in his eyes. But he was calm. Too calm. He didn't bring it up. Not the wine. Not the note. Not them. I didn't sleep that night. I laid next to him, staring at the ceiling. His back was turned, like always. The space between us felt like a canyon. In the morning, I checked his phone. I didn't even try to feel bad about it. Nothing. No messages. No group chats. No call logs that stood out. Either he had deleted everything, or there was never anything to delete. And somehow, that was worse. Days passed. The house got quieter. The friends stopped coming around. No loud laughs from the living room. No Toby making jokes. No Cunnel with his lazy smirk. No Lonra standing in corners, saying nothing and seeing everything. It was just us again. Empty. Cold. Then I saw Cunnel. I was in the grocery store, reaching for tomatoes. He was down the next aisle, holding a basket, dressed like any ordinary man running errands. Our eyes met. He didn't flinch. He didn't avoid me. He just nodded. Like nothing had happened. Like I hadn't walked into a room I was never supposed to understand. Like the silence we'd kept was part of some unspoken agreement. I looked away first. My hands were shaking. I left without buying anything, and when I got home, he had bought me flowers. My favorite ones. The ones I hadn't mentioned in over a year. He didn't say why. Just left them on the table. No card. No note. No, I'm sorry, no, I missed you, just flowers. Fresh. Beautiful. Like they were supposed to erase something. But I knew. He knew what happened. He just wasn't going to say it. And maybe he didn't expect me to say it either. Maybe that was the trade. His silence, for mine. I haven't told a soul. Not a friend. Not a sister. Not even the mirror. I carry it like a folded letter in my chest. Sealed, but heavy. Some nights, I dream I stayed. That I didn't walk out. That I let something happen. And in the dream, it isn't violent. It's quiet. Slow. Almost tender. And I wake up with shame clinging to my skin like sweat. Other nights, I dream I screamed. That I grabbed the wine glass and shattered it on the floor. That I cursed all 3 of them by name. That I marched to his office the next morning and said, "You don't get to do that to me." But I didn't. I didn't scream. I didn't stay. I didn't speak. I just left. And then I stayed. Stayed in the marriage. Stayed in the silence. Stayed in the version of myself that knew how to disappear when needed. And now, I ask myself the same question over and over again. What does that make me? If nothing happened, is it still betrayal? Or is it worse because it almost did? Is it cheating if I never touched them? Or is it cheating that I didn't hate the attention? What's worse? What they did to me? Or that some part of me wanted to be wanted, seen, noticed, even if it came from the wrong eyes. Even now, I can't tell if I was a victim or a woman on the edge of her own loneliness. And maybe that's the part that hurts the most, not knowing where the line was. Or maybe knowing exactly where it was and standing too close to it anyway. Because what kind of man, what kind of husband leaves his wife in a room full of wolves and calls it love? Have you ever knocked and wished no one answered? Have you ever walked into a moment so quiet, so carefully arranged, that it made you question everything you believed about the people you love? Would you have walked away like I did? Or would you have stayed, just to hear what they had to say? Would you have spoken up? Would you have screamed? Or would you have sat there like I did, too stunned to trust your own instincts? Because it's easy to say what you do. Until it's your hand on the doorknob. Until it's your name they already know. Until it's your silence that keeps the peace. So I want to ask you, what would you have done? Tell me. Tell someone. Because silence, too, becomes a story, one that lives in your chest and never lets you breathe the same way again. And if this story stirred something in you, if it brought up anything you've tucked away, subscribe to Heartfelt Tales Unfold. The next one might echo something you've never dared say aloud. Some betrayals aren't loud. They don't shatter glass. They don't scream across dinner tables or leave visible bruises. No. Some betrayals whisper. They whisper through half-written notes, through locked doors and unlocked hearts, through men who say nothing because silence does the damage for them. They blink slowly in living rooms that smell like wine and cologne and doubt. He never touched me that day, but I'm not sure I was untouched. And sometimes, that's the deeper bruise. Not what happened, but what could have. What almost did. What still lives in the space between memory and shame. Subscribe to Heartfelt Tales Unfold, not for gossip, not for drama, but for the stories we live and never admit. And if you won't, the comment section is open. Tell us why. Tell us what you saw when your door opened.